Welcome to a new episode of the Straight Wrestling Voices of the Indies podcast. I'm your host Morbo, and with me, as always, everyone's favorite US independent wrestling fan, Sebastian.
Thank you very much, as always, for the introduction, Morbo, and welcome everyone to the fourth episode of the Voices of Straight Wrestling, Voices of the Indies. And our guest today is known in the American independent wrestling scene for wrestling for TWE, Action Wrestling, Scenic City Invitational, but he's originally from Texas, which also shows in his nickname. And therefore, I would like to welcome the pride of Texas. Welcome, Noah Hossman. Thank you for taking the time to be our guest today.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for having me. You guys are actually the first interview that I've done in about 2 years, so I'm excited for it.
Okay, so Noah, for the people who don't know who you are, let's introduce yourself. Who is Noah Hossman?
Well, like you said, my name is Noah Hossman. I have been an independent wrestler for about 5 years now. I call myself the pride of Texas because I'm originally from Texas. I grew up in the Houston area. I was born and raised there. And then I lived out in the Odessa, West Texas area for a couple of years. And since I'm from there, there's obviously the legacy and the history of Texas wrestling that comes from there. You got guys like Terry Funk and Dusty Rhodes and the Von Erichs and so on. So anytime that people watch me, I want them to know that Texas wrestling is the real deal. That I hope that I can carry on the legacy of that, and that I can show what makes it so great, and I can become one of the greats that came from that state.
How did you get into wrestling as a fan, and what fascinates you about wrestling?
So growing up, I was very much like a kid that when I became obsessed over something, I would just try to learn about it as much as possible. Before I got into wrestling, that thing for me was Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, which I was just like, you could tell me, like, you could ask me about any Pokemon, about any of the games or anything like that. I could tell you all about it. That's just like how my brain worked, where once I latched on to one thing, that became my obsession. Like, I didn't want to talk about or watch anything else. It would just be that one thing. And then around when I was about 10 years old, I was flipping through. That's a pretty basic story that everybody will say. I was flipping through the channels on TV one day, and I came across an episode of SmackDown from 2011. And the main event on that show was Randy Orton versus Christian for the world title in a steel cage match. And just like when you watch wrestling for the first time, you can imagine that when you see like that big crowd of people and all the energy of them making noise and these two muscle bound dudes like beating the crap out of each other, you can imagine that like takes your eyes on it and makes you want to focus on it. That was basically my first exposure to it. And then from then forth, I just started watching it every week. I was watching guys like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, Randy Orton, those type of dudes that were getting me watching every week. And then around WrestleMania 28, that was the first pay-per-view that I watched. That's essentially what made me want to become a wrestler after watching that pay-per-view, especially the Triple H and Undertaker match. That match, I remember watching that and just thinking, man, like all the like near falls they did, the drama, the selling with like Shawn's facials and stuff with him being the referee. Like, I just absolutely loved that match. And it basically cemented me wanting to do wrestling. And yeah, that's basically my intro to pro wrestling, brother.
You have a sports-related background with amateur wrestling, football, and gymnastics. Did your multiple sports-related background made it easier for you to learn wrestling or harder to pick or find the style of wrestling that is best fit for you?
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, growing up, I did gymnastics for about 5 years. I did a little bit of amateur throughout middle school, and then I played football throughout middle school, a little bit up to high school. Excuse me, I'm so sorry, that's unprofessional. But yeah, like I'd say that there was definitely a positive for that, because I think anybody that gets into wrestling, if they have some kind of a sports background or any athletic background, when it comes to the actual training part of it, I think that it can make it easier for you, because like if you're just learning things like having to do drop downs or leapfrogs or whatever, I think it definitely can be a plus for you. Like, I know that's a big thing at the performance center now, where they're getting, for a while they were getting guys from the independents for a while, but now they're going to like all these different colleges and recruiting athletes. And like, I don't blame them, because it's like when you have fresh people like that that are super duper athletes that are like 20 or 21 years old, then you can basically just mold them and shape them to how you want to be. So that definitely say it was a plus. As far as my style, when I started out, I had basically a Rick Steiner wannabe gimmick. Like if you like literally like at points at TWE when I first started going there, people were calling me Baby Steiner, and they still do, which doesn't make sense, but that's beside the point. Uh, but yeah, like it was definitely like I tried to model my gimmick after trying to do stuff like that, and like just the style that I wrestled. I tried to incorporate amateur stuff and stuff like that. But as I've gotten older and like I've progressed more in this, like I realized that there was more to me than just that. So I feel like I've naturally tried to progress my character more to just like being a big powerhouse type of dude that just likes to hit people really hard and throw people around.
One of our trainer is seen as one of the most influential trainers is Tom Prichard, who has trained the likes of Brian Cage or Mark Henry. How much is his influence on your career, and what does it make him special as a coach?
Oh, dude, yeah, like Tom is super special. Like actually, the first time that I'd met him, even before I started training with him, because originally I started training in Texas. I trained originally with Stallion Rogers, who's now known, Stallion Rogers, who's formerly known as Kurt Stallion. And then I moved up to the Tennessee area around late 2020 because of COVID. And that's when I started training with him. Before that, I had my very first training seminar when I was like a month in with him. And I actually have a funny thing from that, because I did this training seminar with him, and he was doing this one drill where he was trying to show us how to do like different wrist hold reversals or something like that. But like I'm in there and I'm super duper green. I barely know what I'm doing, barely know how to sell. So I get in there and I'm not really selling it very well. He goes, no, 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 do this, do this. So like I try to do it differently. He's like, no, 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 like act like you're actually getting hurt, like, you know. And he's getting more and more like annoyed. And then he's finally like, Noah, here, let me see your hand. So I give him my hand. He takes my finger, starts biting it. And I go, oh my God, no. He's like, see, that's how you react. Then immediately he starts choking me. When he starts choking me, I take my hands, I take him off where he's choking me. I grab him off and he's like, see how you're acting? That is how you sell. You know, that was like, you can imagine I'm like 16 years old at the time. I'm like, oh my God, you know? But that wasn't like, that was just him messing with me, you know, because that's just the type of guy he is. But yeah, that was like my first introduction to him. And it was like quite an intro, definitely. But yeah, dude, like Tom is special because he's the type of guy that he understands the basics of what needs to be done, and because the little things and basics are so important, because when you have a foundation for that, it makes you be able to grow upon it. I think a lot of people don't, they try to skip through that and they just try to go to what they think is cool or what they think is going to make people go ooh, and when they skip that, they miss out on what's important. So Tom is a very, very valuable in that sense. He's also just a wealth of knowledge, because he's one of the few guys that's still around that's teaching, that came up from that time period from the late 70s and so on, that understands what that was like. They learned from all these people. Like you learned from the Iron Sheik, and you learned from all the people in Memphis, and you learned from like the Houston area back in the 70s and so forth. Like he learned from all these guys, and he's able to instill knowledge that he's learned from that. And I think that's valuable, because I'm afraid that like in the next few years, guys like that aren't going to be around anymore, and it's going to be forgotten. So I'm glad that he's still around to teach people that.
Everyone who follows you on social media can see how much of a fan you are of the late great Terry Funk, who unfortunately passed away not that long ago. How much of an influence does being a Terry Funk fan have on you, what you are portraying and doing in the ring?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like growing up, I obviously knew who Terry was, and like when I got into wrestling and I knew about him. But like after I got into the business, he became way more of an influence just because where I started originally, I started for a promotion in Odessa, Texas called Old School Wrestling. And the promoter there, Fred Urban, who sadly passed away also, he had a very good relationship with Terry. Like they did a whole thing where when they introduced one of their new titles, the West Texas title, they did a whole bunch of video packages where they went out to Amarillo and they got to work with Terry, and they had Terry talk about the history of Texas and put over the belt and all that. And they also got to have Terry come out and introduce the title to the winner of the tournament that was Stallion Rogers. So that like meant a lot to me after I got in. But Terry's influence, I think, is just like he was so important to the business because I think that you can look at him and there's so many different layers to him for what he did. Like you could look at him as being being a technical guy, or he could be a guy that was a cowardly heel that would be goofy, or he could be a badass, or he could be the crazy old man in ECW. Like there's so many different layers and eras of him that you can study, and whether it be just how he carried himself or how he sold or his facials and so forth. Like there's so many different things that you can take from him. And whenever I'm looking and trying to study matches, he's definitely a guy that I try to keep going back to study.
Now talked about how you got into wrestling and also what influenced you early on in your career. But I would like to take a look at like your recent career and what happened in your career, let's say in like the last 50 months, because I have a feeling that it's been a time of new experiences for you and also a time where you got to show at different places how talented you are. And for me, kind of the starting point was when you were part of IWTV Southeast First Uncharted territory. We've talked about this before in this podcast when we interviewed Matt Griffin. That for all of those who don't know, Uncharted Territory was a big series on IWTV originally from Beyond Wrestling, and as a part of the Southeast First storyline, it got moved to the TWE arena to the Southeast. And you won the Discovery Gauntlet in the 6th episode of IWTV Southeast First Uncharted Territory on June 13th, and you continued to win and win and win throughout the season. Also, to explain this, the Discovery Gauntlet is the format that gives an opportunity to upcoming wrestlers, and if you win, you can return the next week. How important was this for your career and maybe also for your development as a wrestler?
Oh yeah, man, that was huge for me. Not just the fact that I was the guy that got to win it, but the fact that, like you said, Uncharted Territory was this big thing that was up in the Northeast. And then when they finally came to the South, out of all the people they could have picked for that, they put me in that spot to be in it. Like that meant the world to me that they trusted me. One of the things that I think that whole thing taught me was just it helped me rediscover myself in a way. Because like when I first started doing it, like I mentioned before, I was doing the amateur. I came out with like the amateur wrestling headgear and the varsity jacket and all that. And then by the end of it, I came out with the fringe jacket that I wear now, and that was the last time I wore it. It helped me being able to do that, do all those matches, helped me like rediscover and redefine who I was. And it was definitely a good point for me just to be like, hey, this is who you really are. Like, you don't need to be wearing this amateur, like, you don't need to be doing this amateur stuff. You can just be you. So that was big in that sense. And I think another learning thing that it taught for me is being able to work with all sorts of different people. Like, I remember I had a match with Chance Reiser, who done a lot of work in DBW. He's a super talented dude. I remember we had a match that I absolutely loved. I got to work with this guy named Damian Turner, who he's a WWA 4 kid. That's still to this day one of my favorite matches, and a match that I like when people ask me, they ask me for one of my matches to check out, I show them that one because to me that's just the perfect example of who Noah Hossman is. So it was definitely like, yeah, Uncharted territory. The Discovery Gauntlet was a big deal for me and helped me a lot. Not just that, but like getting to set the record for the most wins is a big deal also, because it used to be held by Thomas Santel, who held the record at 7-0. So to be able to break the record for that definitely was probably, I would say, is the biggest accomplishment I've had so far.
In the context of your match against Chance Reiser, you already mentioned DPW, Deadlock Pro Wrestling, and fast forward to the start of this year, of 2023, you appeared for Deadlock Pro as a part of their DPW live pay-per-view on January 14th, where you had a three-way match against JD Drake and Eric Roy. How was your experience there wrestling on the pay-per-view?
Oh, dude, it was awesome. Like, DPW was a promotion that when they started up, it was a goal for me to get on. And to be able to start out this year with debuting, not only just debuting there, but to work with Eric Royal, who's a guy that I would argue is not just one of the best in the Southeast, like one of the best on the indies in general, and JD Drake, one of the pillars for their promotion. Like, that was insane for me. Like, I remember I got told that I got booked there, but they didn't tell me what I was doing. So when the match graphic got put out on Twitter, that was my first time finding out too. So like, I saw that and I just freaked out, dude. Like, I remember just like pacing back and forth, like, oh my God, what? But yeah, that was super huge for me, and my experience was awesome. Like, we went out there, all three of us. We had a really good match. The crowd really seemed to like me there, and it was just a wonderful experience. Like, DPW is somewhere that I would love to get back in the future.
You already talked about the experience you had at DPW, and I would like to know, maybe like in general, does wrestling on a pay-per-view feels different? Like, for example, wrestling on a show where you know, okay, it will be on demand on IWTV, or even a show where you know, okay, this won't be taped at all, so it is only for the fans in the arena. Is it a different feeling?
Yeah, there's definitely a feeling. Like, I think it's more so whenever something is just recorded versus when it's not. Because when it's not recorded, it's more like a house show type of thing, or just a show for the fans. I feel it's a lot more relaxed because it's like, all right, if we go out there, we mess something up or something's weird, like, we don't really have to worry about it getting out there. But when it's a show that's recorded or it's live, like, there's definitely another level of like, all right, we can't mess up, or like, I don't want something to go wrong here. So yeah, I'd basically just say that that's the main two differences. Like, I remember when we went live on IWTV for the first time for TWE, there was definitely a feeling of we did that for Sink or Swim in 2022 where I wrestled Broken Finley. There was definitely a feeling of like, all right, this is bigger than before, just like you said, because it's live and it's going out for people in time to see.
We've all come to know you who follow your career as quite a hard-hitting guy over the years, but also like more of a brawling type of wrestler, I would say. But in this March, you had a death match at ICW No Holds Barred Pit Fighter X15 on March 10th against Hoodfoot. How was this experience for you? And can you imagine that you will have more death matches maybe in the future?
Yeah, dude, that was a completely new experience for me. Like, I was never the biggest fan of deathmatch wrestling growing up, or like even just hardcore wrestling in general. But as I got into the business, I got to be around it a lot more. Like, I remember when ICW first started coming to TWE, and the partnership for them with them started, it definitely getting to see it and being around it made me appreciate it a lot more, just because I saw all that goes into it. And like, I don't think a lot of people realize that. I think there's a stigma with deathmatch guys. They all just don't know how to work, or they're just garbage wrestlers, don't know what to do. No, like, to be able to do a death match, you have to be a really good worker, because you have to be able to protect not just yourself, but the guy you're working with when you're using all these gimmicks and stuff. So like that was just a big thing for me that made me respect it. And being able to debut for ICW was definitely a super cool thing to do my first death match. Not just debut there, but I got to do it against Hoodfoot, who's a guy that I've grown to love, and he was someone that I wanted to work with. So like getting able to do that was super cool. But yeah, man, like as far as death matches for me in the future go, I could see myself doing another death match, but I want it to be more in a situation where it means something, if that makes sense. Like I don't just want to do them just for the sake of doing them. Like if I was in a feud with someone and it called for it as a big blow off match, I would definitely love to do it. But it's just something that I would want to be more special.
Speaking of harder matches, speaking of matches which mean something, you were part of the War Games match, which was the main event of the biggest TWE show in their history for 10 years strong, not that long ago, on August 26th this year. Would you say that this elevated your, but maybe also Billy Tipton's and Raid's, Derek Neal's career to be in the most important match of the most important show of the promotion, which also had so much build up to it?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like, not like the War Games match was super special just because, like you said, it was the biggest show in our company's, like TW's history, like at our biggest crowd ever. We were completely sold out and had our highest viewership ever. But like, yeah, like being able to do that, really just that whole feud with the Coven of the Goat, being able to do that with Tank, I feel like didn't just elevate me, it elevated everybody else that was in it. Like I know that it elevated Billy Tipton and made him better. It helped Aaron Wade be able to find a new character for himself more as a heel, and he's gained a lot more confidence in himself, and he's just become a lot better. I know CJ Lawler being able to work with Tank, he's a completely different guy than he started out, because like if you watched when he started, he was just a random guy wearing Zubaz that didn't know what he was doing. But being able to be under the learning tree of Tank and the Rev, Dan Wilson, I think has helped him a lot. So yeah, like that whole feud, I would say working with them has elevated me and just made me a better worker in general.
A question that I'm really interested in, that just came to my mind that I would like to know. As we all know, Jaden Newman should have been in that match as well, but he got injured. If you listen to this, Jaden, all the best to you. We all believe in you. And did this change like your preparation for the match, or how difficult did it make for all of you to maybe like prepare for the match, and also to keep your focus? Because I can imagine if something like this happens, it's a real blow to everyone who knows Jaden, to everyone at TWE, and so on.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like I was there the night that Jaden broke his jaw. We were at EWF out in North Carolina, Steve Carino's promotion, and I was with him in the hospital and all that when that happened. And I remember it being just such a like crushing blow, because at any time that happens, like it's awful, obviously, but for that to happen also the week before we're having this big blow off, and the week after he had like just joined the Coven, like that was just, it sucked, dude. Like it was just not great. Like, but it's one of those things where, like they say, that like the saying goes, like you got to keep the show going. Like when there's a bump in the road, you just got to keep going forward. And that was one of those things where like we adapted to what we could with it. And I think that on short notice, we were able to put out as best of a match as we could with the circumstances. Like Rev being able to be in that match, I think was the best possible solution that we could have come with it.
Going back to the things you did in the time period I described, you also had another debut, because not that long ago, or 4 days ago on the day we are taping this, you made your New Jersey debut with H2O at WrestleMania on September 10th, a promotion also known for like a rougher style of wrestling. Given your first deathmatch experience, given being part of a War Games match, could you imagine doing even more of these hardcore style matches? We just talked about doing more death matches, but could you see that this in generally could change your style more into a harder direction, not only in terms of death matches, but also like more hardcore matches, more matches like the War Games match?
Yeah, being able to, debuting at H2O, like, I know that whole environment is, like, it's run by Matt Tremont, who's obviously a legend in the deathmatch scene, and being able to work for there was just a great honor, because that was another place that I had wanted to work for a long time, and I'm glad that I got to. As far as doing more deathmatch stuff, I could see that happening, absolutely. But like I said, it's more so a thing of I want it to fit and make sense for it to happen instead of just doing it. Like I got nothing. Like I have nothing against people that do death matches on the regular, but it's just one of those things where I just want it to mean more if it makes sense in the moment. Like if I was if I'm having a big blow off feud with somebody, I want, if like they wanted to have like a steel cage match to finish is the last match, or they want to have a hardcore match, I would definitely be open to it. But I think as far as like exploring my like styles for myself, I try not to limit myself as just doing one thing. I think that that's a problem with a lot of people in wrestling, is that they try to just stick to one thing and they don't want to explore other ideas or other styles. Like I don't want to be just known as, oh, I'm the big bad bruiser guy, or oh, I'm just the deathmatch guy. Like it's going back to what we said, like we were talking about Terry Funk earlier. Like Terry had all these different styles and things that he was known for and things that he was great at. I want to be just like that, where when my name gets brought up, I want people to just think of me as a great wrestler that can adapt to all these different places.
By being from Texas, you're mostly known for your work in the southeast of the United States and in the independent wrestling scene of the southeast. And there we reached a milestone this year by competing at the SECI Tournament at the Scenic City Invitational. I was live in attendance there. And after having been in non-tournament action as well as Action Future Showcase last year, how much did this mean to you professionally, but also personally?
So professionally, it meant obviously a lot to me, just because when I first moved up here, I felt like I learned about the SCI tournament and I learned about the history of guys that had been a part of it. Like my original trainer Stallion, like he was a part of the finals in 2017 with Matt Riddle. Like it's just one of those things where it's something that I wanted to do just because I know about the history of the tournament in this area. So being able to be part of it, that itself meant a lot to me. Personally, it meant a lot to me as well, because getting to wrestle Manders in the first round, he's a guy that is like, besides Gnarls Garvin, Big Beef, I would say was the number one guy on the indies that I wanted to work with. So being able to have that match and a big tournament of that just meant the absolute world to me. Like being able to go out there and show that I can hang with a guy who's considered one of the best on the indies right now, like that just like it just meant the absolute world to me. And like that match, I think is probably my best match, I would say. So like yeah, absolutely, like personally, professionally, that whole night just meant so much to me.
You just mentioned your match against Manders in the first round, who would go on to win the tournament. And I would like to know, is this like losing against another cowboy in wrestling and also the eventual winner? do you think is this like an honor for you, or does it like even make you even more motivated for the future, that you say to yourself, next year I'm going to win it, or the year after it I'm going to win it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, being able to have a great match is one thing, but I would rather prefer to win. Yeah. So being able to have that match is definitely, I'm going to use this as motivation myself in the future. Like, I don't like, it was cool to have that match, but I want to be the guy that ends up winning the trophy and that everybody is crying and having the sweet summer moment with, you know what I mean? I think that's everybody in wrestling. They want to be able to have that moment where they can be in the spotlight, which my time hasn't come yet, but you guys just watch out because my moment's going to come sooner or later than later.
My last question before Morbo will talk to you about what is next for you in general, pretty much goes back to the beginning, because as I said before, you were born in Texas, and Texas also plays a huge part in your wrestling career, being called the pride of Texas and carrying the flag of Texas to the ring and so on. But like I mentioned before, you are mostly known for your work in the Southeast. But now you have been announced as a part of Old School Wrestling Presents the Revival in Odessa, Texas on December 2nd this year. And as you said before, this was a promotion where you started, and now they are coming back and you are announced for the show. So I would like to know, first of all, how much does this mean to you? How much does wrestling in Texas in general mean to you? And would you say that this is a goal for you to wrestle more in Texas and maybe even make a name for yourself there in the same way that you did in the Southeast?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like you said, coming up December 2nd, Old School Wrestling is going to have our big return show. We're going to have it at the Ector County Coliseum in Odessa, Texas. And it's going to be featuring Chavo Guerrero, which is a huge deal because he was a guy that during OSW's earlier years, he was around it a lot and he was super close with Fred, the promoter. So to be able to have him on that show means a lot. And just for me in general, being able to go back there is going to be a super cool moment for me because I haven't been back there since around 2020. And since I've moved up here, I'm just a completely different wrestler. Like if you look at footage of me from when I started out there in about 2018, 2019, I'm just a really timid, green guy that didn't really find himself. And now I feel like I've really found myself and changed myself, not just with like how I wrestle, but like my look and my body and all that. I'm really looking forward to that. As far as wrestling in Texas goes, Texas is definitely an area that I'd like to explore more. Last year I got to wrestle for Pele Pro Wrestling out in the Arlington area. And that was super cool because that was the first time I wrestled Stallion Rogers, which that meant an absolute lot to me because I got to wrestle my trainer. It was the first time I was out in Texas in nearly 3 years. So that was cool. But as far as the future goes, yeah, I would love to be able to go out there and wrestle more out in that area. I know New Texas out is doing their thing. Like that's definitely a promotion that I would love to cross on my bucket list. Yeah, there's just like a lot. Like I feel like Texas is such a big area. Like I know the El Paso scene out in West Texas is like it's like there's all these different things and areas there. Like but El Paso is like almost like its own little world just because they're so far off. And I know that they border Juarez in Mexico. I know the lucha scene is so big out there. Like that's another place that I would love to get out there in the future.
Speaking of wanting to wrestle more in Texas and everything you accomplished over the last 16 months, what is your goal for the next 16 months?
I think really for me, it's just getting out there more. That's definitely the biggest goal. I would love to wrestle up in the Midwest area more. Like freelance wrestling out in Chicago is definitely a goal for me. I would love to wrestle there. Naptown Pro is definitely another one that I would love to wrestle at. I would also love to wrestle more in the Northeast area. Like, I would love to make my debut for Wrestling Open in the future, or I would love to wrestle for Pro Wrestling Grind up in the Massachusetts area. Really just getting out there, I think, is like what's going to be a big goal for me coming up. Because like you said, I've made my name in the Southeast area, but it's just now moving on and getting out there more in different areas. That's what's going to be the next goal for me as far as the future goes.
And what are your biggest goals in your career in general?
I think the biggest goal for me, I would love to be able to go to Japan one day. I think just because of the style of wrestling that I most love, like the hard-hitting style, like All Japan with guys like Steve Williams and Stan Hansen and such, like that's obviously my biggest goal. I would love to go out there and like do a tour up there possibly. Like after that, ultimately, I think my biggest goal that I want for myself is whenever my name gets brought up to people, I want them to think of me as a wrestler that was good and a wrestler that was also just a good person that gave back to the business and made it better, that he left it better than he found it.
Do you have any matches that are already announced in the near future that you would like to talk about, or recent matches that people should watch?
So coming up at the end of September, we've got Action Wrestling has got a show around September 29th, I believe. You can always catch me at TWE Chattanooga. That runs on Saturday nights. I know that we've got a show not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday. And you might possibly see me at H2O in the near future. As far as matches of mine to check out, really just check out that Manders match from SCI this year. That one was really good. And also check out from night 2, check out the tag match featuring me, Aaron Wade, and Shug D versus Tank, Jaden Newman, and Mike Jackson. That is a match that if you're a fan of pro wrestling, like you're gonna enjoy that match. Definitely check out those 2 matches.
Okay, no, that's it. We are at the end of the interview, and as always, the stage is yours. You can promote anything you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure to be on here and talk with you guys and just talk about my career. If you want to find me on Twitter, you can look me up at Big Hoss 1916, or you can find me on Facebook. Just look up Noah Hossman. Or if you want to find me on Instagram, just look up Big Hoss 916. Shout out to Big Hurt 916. But yeah, those are my 3 main social media. 3 main social media that I use. And if you want to get updates on what I'm doing, just check me out on there.
Okay, thank you very much for coming on the show, Noah. We did a review of the SCI on our German podcast, and we really enjoyed your match against Manders, and we were immediately fan of you. So you were on our wish list from day one when we created this podcast. So if any promoter, not only in North America, also the world, maybe Europe, maybe Germany, listens to this podcast, book this man, please, because he's really, really good.
Book this man. Give me money. Give me money.
Very much also for me. Thank you as always to Morbo. Thank you as always to Florian. And of course, thank you to you, Noah. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. It was a pleasure for all of us. Just like Morbo said, we are all big fans of you. And thank you to everyone listening, to everyone who has listened to the episodes before, who listens to this episode, and who will maybe listen to our episodes in the future. With this, thank you very much to all of you, and goodbye.